How's it going this morning? Good morning. Today is day 24 of going through the Bible in 102 days. So this has been a cool journey so far. We're a bit more than 1/5 of the way through already, which is kind of crazy. Oop, sorry. Um, in terms of chapter count, we're actually like a bit just past the 21% mark. And so that's pretty neat. That's very, very neat. So today what we're going to be reading is going to be First Samuel chapter 16 to 28. That is our morning reading today. To get a visual update of where we're at today, this is it right here. There you go. So yeah, in terms of like just chapter count, again, just past 21%, which is pretty cool. Pretty exciting stuff. So, how are you doing this morning? If you're hearing me, if everything is working well, let me know, and I'd love to see who's on this morning. So as we get ready to go into this, just gonna do a couple of things here. And this here is my reading schedule. So today we're Friday here, so it's 7 a.m. to about 8:30 that we'll be reading this morning, and then tomorrow I'll be reading at 10 a.m. I'll be reading with a friend. I'm really excited to read with a friend tomorrow. It's gonna be fun. It's been really fun all the times I've gotten to read with someone else so far, and yeah, it's felt very, very enriching to myself, and I hope it has been to you too. Then here, this is the collaborative notes. So if you have any observation in the passage that we're reading in whatever chapter, just throw them into here and add them to the discussion. It would be really great to see your thoughts, your observations as we go through this today. Today we are, where are we? There you go, in First Samuel. So yeah, so add your thoughts, add your observations as we go, and it'll and in the collaborative doc or in the chat. And this here is it's like same document, but this is with my notes that I'll be taking after every chapter. So before I do, I have to read a quick disclaimer here from the Bible translation that we'll be using. The scriptures quoted are from the NET Bible, https://netbible.com, copyright 1996-2019, used with permission from Biblical Studies Press, LLC, all rights reserved. Okay, so let's pray, and then we'll get right into reading the word. Lord God, I thank you, Lord, for this morning. I thank you for this time that we just get to be here, be alive in this time in history. You gave us life, you gave us breath to be alive today. Lord, I pray that today would be a day that we would be strengthened in you, that we would draw closer to you, that we would be so amazed by you in the reading of your word, and as we meditate on that throughout our day. Lord, I pray that you would speak to us, and that we would really be amazed by who you are, the mighty King of Kings, Lord of Lords. We thank you that we get to come before you, we get to approach you, we get to open your word. I thank you for your amazing grace, Lord. Please bless the reading of your word. I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, so let's start reading. 1 Samuel 16. Yeah, again, this is it right here. What we're doing today, 16 to 28. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long do you intend to mourn for Saul? I have rejected him as king over Israel. Fill your horn with olive oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse in Bethlehem, for I have selected a king for myself from among his sons." Samuel replied, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me." But the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you should do. You will anoint the one I point out to you." Samuel did what the Lord told him. When he arrived in Bethlehem, the elders of the city were afraid to meet him. They said, "Do you come in peace?" He replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." So he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel noticed Eliab and said to himself, "Surely here before the Lord stands his chosen king." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't be impressed by his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." God does not view things the way people do. People look at on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and presented him to Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Then Jesse presented Shammah, but Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse presented 7 of his sons to Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Then Samuel asked Jesse, "Is that all the young men?" Jesse replied, "There is still the youngest one, but he's taking care of the flock." Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and get him, for we cannot turn our attention to other things until he comes here." So Jesse had him brought in. Now he was ruddy, with attractive eyes and a handsome appearance. The Lord said, "Go and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn full of olive oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David from that day onward. Then Samuel got up and went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord had turned away from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Then Saul's servants said to him, "Look, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord instruct his servants who are here before you to go look for a man who knows how to play the lyre. Then, whenever the evil spirit from God comes upon you, he can play the lyre and you will feel better." So Saul said to his servants, "Find me a man who plays well and bring him to me." One of his attendants replied, "I have seen a son of Jesse in Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave warrior and is articulate and handsome, for the Lord is with him." So Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is out with the sheep." So Jesse took a donkey and loaded with bread, uh, a container of wine, and a young goat, and sent them to Saul with his son David. David came to Saul and stood before him. Saul liked him a great deal, and he became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, "Let David be my servant, for I am very pleased with him." So whenever the Spirit from God would come upon Saul, David would take his lyre and play it. This would bring relief to Saul and make him feel better. Then the evil spirit would leave him alone. All right. Um, The Lord guides Samuel to go anoint the next king of Israel in Bethlehem. He goes to Jesse's sons and is impressed by the oldest son's appearance, but God looks at the heart. Interesting similarity to Saul, who was very tall and very handsome. Samuel anoints David. Saul is tormented by an evil spirit, and so David serves Saul directly by playing the lyre for him. When he's being tormented. Okay. 1 Samuel 17. David kills Goliath. All right. This is a big one. The Philistines gathered their troops for battle. They assembled at Succoth in Judah. They camped in Ephes Damim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelite army assembled and camped in the valley of Elah, where they arranged their battle lines to fight against the Philistines. The Philistines were standing on one hill, and the Israelites on another hill, with the valley between them. Then a champion came out from the camp of the Philistines. His name was Goliath. He was from Gath. He was close to 7 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and was wearing scale body armor. The weight of his bronze body armor was 5,000 shekels. He had bronze shin guards on his legs and a bronze javelin slung over his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point of his spear weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer was walking before him. Goliath stood and called to Israel's troops, "Why do you come out to prepare for battle? Am I not the Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose for yourselves a man, so he may come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and strike me down, we will become your servants. But if I prevail against him and strike him down, you will become our servants and will serve us." Then the Philistines said, "I defy Israel's troops this day. Give me a man so we can fight each other." When Saul and all the Israelites heard these words of the Philistine, they were upset and very afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse from Bethlehem in Judah. He had 8 sons, and in Saul's day he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. The names of the 3 sons who went to war were Eliab, his firstborn, Abinadab, the second oldest, and Shammah, the third oldest. Now David was the youngest. While the 3 oldest sons followed Saul, David was going back and forth from Saul in order to care for his father's sheep in Bethlehem. Meanwhile, for 40 days, the Philistine approached every morning and evening and took his position. Jesse said to his son David, Take your brothers this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread. Go quickly to the camp of your brothers. Also, take these 10 portions of cheese to their commanding officer. Find out how your brothers are doing and bring back their pledge that they received the goods. They are with Saul and the whole Israelite army in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines." So David got up early in the morning and entrusted the flock to someone else who would watch over it. After loading up, he went just as Jesse had instructed him. He arrived at the camp as the army was going out to battle lines, shouting its battle cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up their battle lines opposite one another. After David had entrusted his cargo to the care of the supply officer, he ran to the battlefront. When he arrived, he asked his brothers how they were doing. As he was speaking with them, the champion named Goliath, the Philistine from Gath, was coming up from the battle lines of the Philistines. He spoke the way he usually did, and David heard it. When all the men of Israel saw this man, they retreated from his presence and were very afraid. The men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who is coming up? He does so to defy Israel. But the king will make the man who can strike him down very wealthy. He will give him his daughter in marriage, and he will make his father's house exempt from tax obligations in Israel." David asked the men who were standing near him, "What will be done for the man who strikes down this Philistine and frees Israel from this humiliation?" For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he defies the armies of the living God? The soldiers told him what had been promised, saying, "This is what will be done for the man who can strike him down." When David's oldest brother Eliab heard him speaking to the men, he became angry with David and said, "Why have you come down here? To whom did you entrust those few sheep in the wilderness? I am familiar with your pride and deceit. You have come down here to watch the battle." David replied, "What have I done now? I can't say anything. Can't I say anything?" Then he turned from those who were nearby to someone else and asked the same question, but they gave him the same answer as before. When David's words were overheard and reported to Saul, he called for him. David said to Saul, "Don't let anyone be discouraged. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." But Saul replied to David, "You aren't able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You're just a boy. He has been a warrior from his youth." David replied to Saul, "Your servant has been a shepherd for his father's flock. Whenever a lion or a bear would come and carry off a sheep from the flock, I would go out after it, strike it down, and rescue the sheep from its mouth. If it rose up against me, I would grab it by its jaw, strike it, and kill it. Your servant has struck down both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be just like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." David went on to say, "The Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear will also deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Then Saul said to David, "Go, the Lord will be with you." Then Saul clothed David with his own fighting attire and put a bronze helmet on his head. He also put body armor on him. David strapped on his sword over his fighting attire and tried to walk around, but he was not used to them. David said to Saul, "I can't walk in these things, for I'm not used to them." So David removed them. He took a staff in his hand, picked out 5 smooth stones from the stream, placed them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, took his sling in hand, and approached the Philistine. The Philistine, with his shield bearer walking in front of him, kept coming closer to David. When the Philistine looked carefully at David, he despised him, for he was only a ruddy and handsome boy. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog, that you are coming after me with sticks?" Then the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come here to me, so I can give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the field." But David replied to the Philistine, "You are coming against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I am coming against you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel's armies, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you down and cut off your head. This day I will give the corpses of the Philistine army to the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the land. Then all the land will realize that Israel has a God, and all this assembly will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you into our hand." The Philistine drew steadily closer to David to attack him, while David quickly ran toward the battle line to attack the Philistine. David reached his hand into the bag and took out a stone. He slung it, striking the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank deeply into his forehead, and he fell down with his face to the ground. David prevailed over the Philistine with just the sling and the stone. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. David did not even have a sword in his hand. David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grabbed Goliath's sword, drew it from its sheath, and after killing him, he cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they ran away. Then the men of Israel and Judah charged forward, shouting a battle cry. They chased the Philistines to the valley and to the very gates of Ekron. The Philistine corpses lay fallen among the Sha'araim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from their hot pursuit of the Philistines, they looted their camp. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put Goliath's weapons in his tent. Now Saul watched David going out to fight the Philistine. He asked Abner, the general in his command of the army, "Whose son is that young man, Abner?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, O king, I don't know." The king said, "Find out whose son this boy is." So when David returned from striking down the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul. He still had the head of the Philistine in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" David replied, "I am the son of your servant Jesse in Bethlehem." All right, that is a pretty big chapter. In terms of how much this chapter has been, I don't know, referenced and used over the years in Christian circles. It's definitely, and even outside, like definitely like one of the best known stories in the entire Bible, both by believers, by non-believers. It's pretty neat, pretty interesting. Yeah, definitely a chapter of gigantic proportions, if you will. But there are a lot of interesting things in here that I wanna take note of. So 1 Samuel 17, there was okay. Goliath rises up to defy Israel and defy God. Everyone in Israel's army is terrified. David shows up to bring refreshments to his brothers. But he becomes upset over Goliath's blasphemies. David goes to fight Goliath, confident that God will bring the victory. David talked about his time as a shepherd, defeating the bear and the lion. Okay, yeah, let's keep going. 1 Samuel 18. When David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan and David became bound together in close friendship. Jonathan loved David as much as he did his own life. Saul retained David on that day and did not allow him to return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David, for he loved him as much as he did his own life. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with the rest of his gear, including his sword, his bow, and even his belt. On every mission on which Saul sent him, David achieved success, so Saul appointed him over the men of war. This pleased not only all the men, but also Saul's servants. When the men arrived after David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women from all the cities came out singing and dancing to meet King Saul. They were happy as they played their tambourines and three-stringed instruments. The women who were playing the music sang, "Saul has struck down his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." This made Saul very angry. The statement displeased him, and he thought, "They have attributed to David tens of thousands, but to me they have attributed only thousands. What does he lack except the kingdom?" So Saul was keeping an eye on David from that day onward. The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he prophesied within his house. Now David was playing the lyre as usual. There was a spear in Saul's hand. And Saul threw the spear, thinking, I'll nail David to the wall. But David escaped from him on 2 different occasions. So Saul feared David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. Saul removed David from his presence and made him a commanding officer. David led the army out to battle and back. Now David achieved success in all he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how very successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he was the one leading them out to the battle and back. Then Saul said to David, Here's my oldest daughter, Merab. I want to give her to you in marriage. Only be a brave warrior for me and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul thought, There's no need for me to raise my hand against him. Let it be the hand of the Philistines. But David said to Saul, Who am I? Who are my relatives or the clan of my father in Israel, that I should become the king's son-in-law? When the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she instead was given in marriage to Adriel, who was from Meholah. Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. When they told Saul about this, it pleased him. Saul said, I will give her to him, so that she may become a snare to him, and so the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So Saul said to David, Today is the second time for you to become my son-in-law. Then Saul instructed his servants, Tell David secretly, the king is pleased with you, and all his servants like you. So now become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants spoke these words privately to David. David replied, Is becoming the king's son-in-law something insignificant to you? I'm just a poor and lightly esteemed man. When Saul's servants reported what David had said, Saul said, Here is what you should say to David. There is nothing that the king wants as a price for the bride except 100 Philistine foreskins, so that he can be avenged of his enemies. Now Saul was thinking that he could kill David by the hand of the Philistines. So his servants told David these things, and David agreed to become the king's son-in-law. Now the specified time had not yet expired when David, along with his men, went out and struck down 200 Philistine men. David brought their foreskins and presented them all to the king, so that he could become the king's son-in-law. Saul then gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became even more afraid of him. Saul continued to be at odds with David from then on. The leaders of the Philistines could march out, and as often as they did so, David achieved more success than all of Saul's servants. His name was held in high esteem. Okay. So things take a turn here. Saul starts to despise David and be afraid because he can see that God is with David. On 2 occasions, he tried to nail David to the wall with his spear. Saul puts David as a commander in the battle lines, hoping that David will die in battle. David becomes Saul's son-in-law by marrying Michal. It almost got it. It did Michael, but there you go, Michal. Okay, sorry, I saw some messages coming in through the chat. Bears in Israel. Yeah. Different animals that were alive in Israel at the time that are not there anymore, that have since been probably hunted out or just driven out of the land, like bears and lions, like very uncommon animals to think of in Israel nowadays. Like bears are definitely some of the most widespread animals across the earth, but yeah, no bears anymore in Israel, as far as I know. Um, I definitely didn't see any when I was there, and no lions either. Um, so yeah, interesting. It's really interesting, the animals, and like there's definitely were lions there. Like, just 2 days ago, was it 3 days ago, when we read about like Samson just like tearing the lion in half. So there were definitely more dangerous animals there than now, which made, like, I don't know, it made like the job of a shepherd so much more intense too, because it was like not only the sheep themselves to care for, not only marauders, but also like much more dangerous animals that were there. So interesting. And then no longer filled with the Holy Spirit, evil spirits were drawn to him, to Saul, yeah. And Saul was no longer protected by God. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, exactly. And you see Saul is kind of going downhill pretty fast as he's being tormented, and it went from him just kind of like needing a little bit of support and relief from this torment to like now just giving into it and trying to destroy David first directly, but then he has like this like idea of like, oh, I'll just have David killed in the battle lines instead, because he realizes that he can't touch David. And so it's interesting. It's really interesting. Oh, sorry, something else just came in. We read of the evil thoughts that fill Saul: jealousy, rash, and murderous thoughts. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Not good things at all. Not good thoughts, not good intentions, and not good actions on Saul's part. As yeah, he starts off just being jealous, and that turns into a murderous rage. So which we'll see here is going to keep getting more and more dark, and uh, yeah, more and more like maddening as he starts this insane manhunt for David, this boy that's like in his service. Sorry, I just want to make one more note from the chapter before, and then we'll keep reading. But there's it was about Jonathan and David. Um, Jonathan and David became very close friends. Jonathan loved David more than his own life. All right, I just wanted to add that to my notes because it was repeated a couple times how David loved Jonathan. Jonathan loved David more than his own life. Or yes. Anyways, let's keep reading. Then Saul told his son Jonathan and all his servants to kill David. But Saul's son, Jonathan, liked David very much. So Jonathan told David, "My father Saul is trying to kill you, so be careful tomorrow morning. Find a hiding place and stay in seclusion. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. I will speak to my father about you. When I find out what the problem is, I will let you know." So Jonathan spoke on David's behalf to his father Saul. He said to him, "The king should not sin against his servant David, for he has not sinned against you. On the contrary, his actions have been very beneficial for you. He risked his life when he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord gave all Israel a great victory. When you saw it, you were happy. So why would you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death for no reason?" Saul accepted Jonathan's advice and took an oath. "As surely as the Lord lives, he will not be put to death." Then Jonathan called David and told him all these things. Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he served him as he had done formerly. Now once again there was war, so David went out to fight the Philistines. He defeated them thoroughly, and they ran away from him. Then an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. He was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand while David was playing the lyre. Saul tried to nail David to the wall with the spear, but he escaped from Saul's presence, and the spear drove into the wall. David escaped quickly that night. Saul sent messengers to David's house to guard it and to kill him in the morning. Then David's wife Michal told him, "If you do not save yourself tonight, tomorrow you will be dead." So Michal lured David through the window, and he ran away and escaped. Then Michal took a household idol and put it on the bed. She put a quilt made of goat's hair over its head and then covered the idol with the garment. When Saul sent messengers to arrest David, she said, "He's sick." Sorry. Something that I just noticed, and it's interesting because I'm wondering if okay. I don't want to stop the reading, but it's interesting because in the previous chapter, there's like this curious note of when Saul is saying that he'll give his daughter Michal to David. He says that he'll give his daughter Michal to David so that she'll be a snare for him. And that kind of struck me when I was reading it. And I was like, that's a little bit odd. But now it makes sense because you see here, like, then Michal took a household idol and put it on the bed. So I guess there is probably, like, Michal was probably invested in some kind of idol worship where she had a household idol of her own. And so it's interesting seeing how Saul has devised this plan to destroy David in all kinds of ways. He tried to kill him directly 3 times, tried to have his servants kill him, put him in the battle lines so that the war will kill him. But he also marries off this daughter to him, this daughter that is idolatrous and has a household idol. Just interesting. Very, very interesting. But yet you see God protecting David and God's plan prevailing. And no matter what Saul tries to do, God's plan prevails. And this story is going to keep going. It's going to keep getting more intense with like I said, a crazy manhunt that is about to happen. Wild stuff. Let's keep reading though. When Saul sent messengers to arrest David, she said, "He's sick." Then Saul sent messengers back to David to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me on his bed so I can kill him." When the messengers came, they found only the idol on the bed and the quilt made of goat's hair as at its head. Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me this way by sending my enemy away? Now he has escaped." Michal replied to Saul, he said to me, "Help me, get away, or else I will kill you." Whoa. Now David had run away and escaped. He went to Samuel in Ramah and told him everything that Saul had done to him. Then he and Samuel went and stayed at Naioth. It was reported to Saul saying, "David is at Naioth in Ramah." So Saul sent messengers to capture David. When they saw a company of prophets prophesying with Samuel standing there as their leader, the Spirit of God came upon Saul's messengers, and they also prophesied. When it was reported to Saul, he sent more messengers, but they prophesied too. So Saul sent messengers a 3rd time, but they also prophesied. Finally, Saul himself went to Ramah. When he arrived at the large cistern that is in Seku, he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" They said, "At Naioth in Ramah." So Saul went to Naioth in Ramah. The Spirit of God came upon him as well, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth in Ramah. He even stripped off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel. He lay there naked all that day and night. For that reason, it is asked, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" Oh, that's interesting. That's the 2nd time we hear that. Okay. Let's see. This is a few things here. Okay. Saul tells his servants to kill David, Jonathan objects. Saul sends people to kill David in his home, but Michal helps him sneak out and get away. Interestingly, she puts an idol in the bed and puts goat's hair on it. The chapter before, it was said how Saul gave her as a wife to David, hoping that she would be a snare to him. Okay, yeah. David ran away, and Saul kept sending men after him, but they would always end up prophesying. Eventually, Saul himself goes, and he ends up prophesying. It's just really funny. It's, yeah, anyways. Actually, and ends up naked. It's, anyways. Let me see if I don't see anything in the collaborative notes, but I see a few more comments coming in here. What evil spirit can come from God? That's a good question. Must be a translation issue. It could be a translation issue. It could be a, yeah, it could be something that's yeah, in terms of like a language limitation going from one language to another. But there is, I don't want to get too sidetracked on this discussion, but there is okay, there is a passage that we still have to get to with King Ahab, and it's in 1 Kings 22, where it says, "And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and going to his death there? One suggested this, another that. Finally, a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. By what means? The Lord asked. I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it." So there's kind of like this weird situation that happens where this evil spirit approaches God with this plan to lie to King Ahab, to deceive him, where, like, in a sense, it's like if he's been sent from God, but not entirely directly. But anyways, that's part of a huge discussion. Again, I don't want to get sidetracked in that. Let's keep reading though. Great question to think about though, and yeah, and probably in like a certain language limitation there too in the translation. But all right, Jonathan seeks Javid. I combine their names. Jonathan seeks to protect David. David fled from Naioth in Ramah. He came to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my offense? How have I sinned before your father that he is seeking my life?" Jonathan said to him, "By no means are you going to die. My father does nothing large or small without making me aware of it. Why would my father hide this matter from me? It just won't happen." Taking an oath, David again said, "Your father is very much aware of the fact that I have found favor with you, and he has thought, don't let Jonathan know about this, or he will be upset. But as surely as the Lord lives and you live, there is about one step between me and death." Jonathan replied to David, "Tell me what I can do for you." David said to Jonathan, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and I am certainly expected to join the king for a meal. You must send me away so I can hide in the field until the third evening from now. If your father happens to miss me, you should say, 'David urgently requested me to let him go to his town Bethlehem, for there is an annual sacrifice there for his entire family.' If he should then say, 'That's fine,' then your servant is safe. But if he becomes very angry, be assured that he has decided to harm me. You must be loyal to your servant, for you have made a covenant with your servant in the Lord's name. If I am guilty, you yourself kill me. Why bother taking me to your father?" Jonathan said, "Far be it from you to suggest this. If I were at all aware that my father had decided to harm you, wouldn't I tell you about it?" David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" Jonathan said to David, "Come on, let's go out to the field." When the two of them had gone out into the field, Jonathan said to David, "The Lord God of Israel is my witness. I will feel out my father about this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably inclined toward David, will I not then send word to you and let you know? But if my father intends to do you harm, may the Lord do all this and more to Jonathan. If I don't let you know and send word to you so you can go safely on your way, may the Lord be with you as he was with my father. While I am still alive, extend to me the loyalty of the Lord, or else I will die. Don't ever cut off your loyalty to my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth, and called David's enemies to account." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. Jonathan once again took an oath with David because he loved him. In fact, Jonathan loved him as much as he did his own life. Jonathan said to him, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, for your seat will be empty. On the third day you should go down quickly and come to the place where you hid yourself the day this all started. Stay near the stone Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows near it as though I were shooting at a target. When I send a boy after them, I will say, 'Go and find the arrows.' If I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows on this side of you, get them, then come back. For as surely as the Lord lives, you will be safe and there will be no problem.' But if I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are on the other side of you,' then get away. For in that case, the Lord has sent you away. With regard to the manner that you and I discussed, the Lord is the witness between us forever." So David hid in the field. When the new moon came, the king sat down to eat his meal. The king sat down in his usual place by the wall, with Jonathan opposite him, and Abner at his side, but David's place was vacant. However, Saul said nothing about it that day, for he thought, "Something has happened to him, ceremonially unclean, to make him ceremonially unclean. Yes, he must be unclean." But the next morning, the second day of the new moon, David's place was still vacant. So Saul said to his son Jonathan, "Why has Jesse's son not come to the meal yesterday or today?" Jonathan replied to Saul, "David urgently requested that he be allowed to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Permit me to go, for we are having a family sacrifice in the town, and my brother urged me to be there. So now, if I have found favor with you, let me go to see my brothers. For that reason, he has not come to the king's table." Saul became angry with Jonathan and said to him, "You stupid traitor, don't I realize that that to your own disgrace and to the disgrace of your mother's nakedness, you have chosen this son of Jesse? For as long as this son of Jesse is alive on the earth, you and your kingdom will not be established. Now send some men and bring him to me, for he is as good as dead." Oof. Jonathan responded to his father Saul, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" And then Saul threw his spear at Jonathan in order to strike him down. So Jonathan was convinced that his father had decided to kill David. Jonathan got up from the table, enraged. He did not eat any food on that second day of the new moon, for he was upset that his father had humiliated David. The next morning, Jonathan, along with a young servant, went out to the field to meet David. He said to his servant, "Run, find the arrows that I am about to shoot." As the servant ran, Jonathan shot the arrow beyond him. When the servant came to the place where Jonathan had shot the arrow, Jonathan called out to the servant, "Isn't the arrow further beyond you?" Jonathan called out to the servant, "Hurry, go faster, don't delay." Jonathan's servant retrieved the arrow and came back to his master. Now the servant did not understand any of this, only Jonathan and David knew what was going on. Then Jonathan gave his equipment to the servant who was with him. He said to him, "Go, take these things back to the town." When the servant had left, David got up from beside the mound, knelt with his face to the ground, and bowed 3 times. Then they kissed each other, and they both wept, especially David. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for the 2 of us have sworn together in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord will be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever.'" Then David got up and left, while Jonathan went back to the town of Naioth. All right. Next one here. David is concerned about going back to Saul. And so Jonathan and David devise a plan to see if Saul plans on killing David or not. Saul gets angry that David is not there and even tries to kill his son Jonathan. So David is unsafe. David and Jonathan swear to maintain each other's families. That is not a good way of summarizing it. The Lord will be between me and you, between my descendants and your descendants. Yeah, I'll just... Yeah, I don't fully understand that, but swear to each... Oops. No. Each other that the Lord will be between them and each other's descendants. Seems significant. I don't fully understand what that means. I'm guessing maybe the Lord be their peace between them and their descendants forever. I'm not sure. If you know, let me know. But let's keep reading. Let's see, chapter 21. Man. Okay, let's see. How are we doing here? All right, David went to Ahimelech, the priest in Nob. Ahimelech was shaking with fear when he met David and said to him, "Why are you by yourself with no one accompanying you?" David replied to Ahimelech the priest, "The king instructed me to do something, but he said to me, 'Don't let anyone know the reason I am sending you or the instruction I have given you. I have told my soldiers to wait at a certain place. Now, what do you have at your disposal? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever can be found." The priest replied to David, "I don't have any ordinary bread at my disposal. Only holy bread is available. Then only if your soldiers have abstained from relations with women." David said to the priest, "Certainly women have been kept away from us, just as on previous occasions when I have set out. The soldiers' equipment is holy, even on an ordinary journey. How much more so will they be holy today, along with their equipment?" So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread there other than the bread of the presence. It had been removed from before the Lord in order to replace it with hot bread on the day it had been taken away. One of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, who was in charge of Saul's shepherds. David said to Ahimelech, "Is there no sword or spear here at your disposal? I don't have my own sword or equipment in hand due to the urgency of the king's instructions." The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, is wrapped in a garment behind behind the ephod. If you wish, take it for yourself. Other than that one, there's no sword here." David said, "There's nothing like it. Give it to me." So on that day, David arose and fled from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Oh, isn't he the one that they sing about when they dance, saying Saul struck down his thousands, but David his tens of thousands?" David thought about what they said and was very afraid of King Achish in Gath. He altered his behavior in their presence, since he was in their power. He pretended to be insane, making marks on the door of the gate and letting his saliva run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look at this madman. Why did you bring him to me? Do I have a shortage of fools so that you have brought me this man to display his insanity in front of me? Should this man enter my house?" That's funny. Okay. As David runs away, he goes to a priest and isn't honest about what he's up to. David eats the bread of the presence and takes Goliath's sword. David goes to the Philistines, but so they won't kill him, acts like a madman. All right, let's go on to chapter 22. So David left there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and the rest of his father's family learned about it, they went down there to him. All those who were in trouble or owed someone money or were discontented gathered around him, and he became their leader. He had about 400 men with him. Whoa. Then David went from there to Mizpah in Moab, where he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God is going to do for me." So he had them stay with the king of Moab. They stayed with him the whole time that David was in the stronghold. Then Gad the prophet said to David, "Don't stay in the stronghold. Go to the land of Judah." So David left and went to the forest of Hereth. But Saul found out the whereabouts of David and the men who were with him. Now Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree at an elevated location with his spear in hand and all his servants stationed around him. Saul said to his servants, "Listen up, you Benjaminites. Is Jesse's son giving fields and vineyards to all of you? Or is he making all of you commanders or officers? For all of you have conspired against me. No one informs me when my own son makes an agreement with the son of Jesse. No one of you feels sorry for me or informs me that my own son has commissioned my own servant to hide in ambush against me, as is the case today." But Doeg the Edomite, who had stationed himself with the servants of Saul, replied, I saw this son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, at Nob. He inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions. He also gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Then the king arranged for a meeting with the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and all the priests of his father's house who were at Nob. They all came to the king. Then Saul said, "Listen, son of Ahitub." He replied, "Here I am, Lord, my lord." Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me and this son Jesse? You gave him bread and a sword and inquired of God on his behalf, so that he opposes me and waits in ambush, as is the case today." Ahimelech replied to the king, "Who among your servants is faithful like David? He is the king's son-in-law, the leader of your bodyguard, and honored in your house. Was it just today that I began to inquire of God on his behalf? Far be it from me. The king should not accuse his servant or any of my father's house, for your servant is not aware of all this, not in whole or in part." But the king said, "You will surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." Then the king said to the messengers who were stationed beside him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, for they too have sided with David." They knew he was fleeing, but they did not inform me. But the king's servants refused to harm the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, "You turn and strike down the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priests. He killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. As for Nob, the city of the priests, Doeg struck down men and women, children and infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep, all with the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, escaped and fled to David. His name was Abiathar. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would certainly tell Saul, 'I am guilty of all the deaths in your father's house.' Stay with me, don't be afraid. Whoever seeks my life is seeking your life as well. You are secure with me." Okay, wow, that's yeah, this is the much darker turn the story takes. Oh man. Okay. David goes to live in a cave, and different men come to him, and eventually he's surrounded by 400 men, and he is their leader. Saul is very paranoid of David at this point. He has the priest who gave David the bread to come before him. He instructs his servants to kill the priest for helping David. His servants refuse, so Saul's Edomite servant does it and kills 85 men. One priest escapes and goes to tell David, and David tells him to stay where he'll be safe. Okay. All right, 1 Samuel 23. David delivers the city of Keilah. They told David, "The Philistines are fighting in Keilah and are looting the threshing floors." So David asked the Lord, "Should I go and strike down these Philistines?" The Lord said to David, "Go, strike down the Philistines and deliver Keilah." But David's men said to him, We are afraid while we are still here in Judah. What will it be like if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines?" So David asked the Lord once again. But again the Lord replied, "Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah and fought the Philistines. He took away their cattle and thoroughly defeated them. David delivered the inhabitants of Keilah. Now, when Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, had fled to David at Keilah, he had brought with him an ephod. When Saul was told that David had come to Keilah, Saul said, God has delivered him into my hand, for he has boxed himself into a corner by entering a city with 2 barred gates. So Saul mustered all his army to go down to Keilah and besiege David and his men. When David realized that Saul was planning to harm him, he told Abiathar, the priest, bring the ephod. Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, your servant has clearly heard that Saul is planning to come to Keilah and destroy the city because of me. Will the leaders of Keilah deliver me into his hand? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, please inform your servant. Then the Lord said, he will come down. David asked, will the leaders of Keilah deliver me and my men into Saul's hand? The Lord said, they will deliver you over. So David and his men, who numbered about 600, set out and left Keilah. They moved around from one place to another. When told that David had escaped from Keilah, Saul called a halt to his expedition. David stayed in the strongholds that were in the desert and in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul looked for him all the time. But God did not deliver David into his hands. David realized that Saul had come out to seek his life. At that time, David was in Horesh in the wilderness of Ziph. Then Jonathan, son of Saul, left and went to David at Horesh. He encouraged him through God. He said to him, don't be afraid, for the hand of my father Saul cannot find you. You will rule over Israel, and I will be your second in command. Even my father Saul realizes this. When the 2 of them had made a covenant before the Lord, David stayed at Horesh, but Jonathan went to his house. Then the Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, isn't David hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshimon? Now, at your own discretion, O king, come down. Delivering him into the king's hand will be our responsibility. Saul replied, may you be blessed by the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Go and make further arrangements. Determine precisely where he is and who has seen him there, for I am told that he is extremely cunning. Locate precisely all the places where he hides and return to me with dependable information. Then I will go with you. If he is in the land, I will find him among all the thousands of Judah. So they left and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Rift Valley to the south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men went to look for him, but David was informed and went down to the rock and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. When Saul heard about it, he pursued David in the wilderness of Maon. Saul went on one side of the mountain, while David and his men went on the other side of the mountain. David was hurrying to get away from Saul, but Saul and his men were surrounding David and his men to capture them. But a messenger came to Saul, saying, come quickly, for the Philistines have raided the land. So Saul stopped pursuing David and went to confront the Philistines. Therefore, that place is called Selah Hamalekoth. Then David went up from there and stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi. Okay. All right. David and his men go rescue a city from the Philistines. Saul finds out that David and his 600 men are there, and so he goes to that city to destroy them. David and his 600 men escape. But Saul eventually finds out about their new whereabouts and goes to find them, to destroy them. But as they're at a point where they're very close to each other, one group on one side of the mountain, the other group on the other side of a mountain. Saul leaves because the Philistines are invading the land. Okay, 1 Samuel 24. When Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, "Look, David is in the desert of En-Gedi." So Saul took 3,000 select men from all Israel and went to find David and his men in the region of the rocks of the mountain goats. He came to the sheepfolds by the road where there was a cave. Saul went into it to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the recess of the cave. David's men said to him, "This is the day about which the Lord said to you, 'I will give your enemy into your hand, and you can do to him whatever seems appropriate to you.'" So David got up and went and quietly cut off an edge of Saul's robe. Afterward, David's conscience bothered him because he had cut off the edge of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "May the Lord keep me far away from doing such a thing to my Lord, who is the Lord's chosen one, by extending my hand against him. After all, he is the Lord's chosen one." David restrained his men with these words and did not allow them to rise up against Saul. Then Saul left the cave and started down the road. Afterward, David got up and went out of the cave. He called to Saul, "My lord, O king." When Saul looked behind him, David kneeled down and bowed with his face to the ground. David said to Saul, "Why do you pay attention when men say, 'David is seeking to harm you, to do you harm?' Today, your own eyes see how the Lord delivered you this very day into my hands in the cave. Some told me to kill you, but I had pity on you and said, 'I will not extend my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's chosen one. Look, my father, and see the edge of your robe in my hand. When I cut off the edge of your robe, I didn't kill you. So realize and understand that I am not planning evil or rebellion, even though I have not sinned against you. You are waiting in ambush to take my life. May the Lord judge between the two of us, and may the Lord vindicate me over you, but my hand will not be against you.' It's like the old proverb says, 'From evil people evil proceeds, but my hand will not be against you.' Who has the king of Israel come out after? Who is it that you are pursuing? A dead dog? A single flea? May the Lord be our judge and arbiter. May he see and arbitrate my case and deliver me from your hands." When David finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" Then Saul wept loudly. He said to David, "You are more innocent than I, for you have treated me well, even though I have tried to harm you. You have explained today how you have treated me well. The Lord delivered me into your hand, but you did not kill me. Now, if a man finds his enemy, does he send him on his way in good shape? May the Lord repay you with good this day for what you have done to me. Now look, I realize that you will in fact be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. So now swear to me by the Lord's name that you will not kill my descendants after me or destroy my name from the house of my father." David promised Saul this on oath. Then Saul went to his house, and David and his men went up to the stronghold. All right. David is hiding in En-Gedi. There, Saul shows up with all his men. Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself, not knowing that David is hiding in that same cave. David cuts off the corner of Saul's robe, but then feels convicted about it, so he goes out to meet the king. David feels bad having done this to the king that God has appointed. Saul recognizes his fault in pursuing David and trying to kill him. The two make a covenant. David agrees not to destroy Saul's descendants. All right. 1 Samuel 25. Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned him. They buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David left and went down to the wilderness of Paran. There was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. This man was very wealthy. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. At that time, he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was both wise and beautiful, but the man was harsh, and his deeds were evil. He was a Calebite. When David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, he sent 10 servants to them, saying, "Go up to Carmel to see Nabal, and give him greetings in my name. Then you will say to my brother, 'Peace to you and your house, peace to all that is yours.' Now I hear that they are shearing sheep for you. When your shepherds were with us, we neither insulted them nor harmed them the whole time they were in Carmel. Ask your own servants, they can tell you. May my servants find favor in your sight, for we have come at the time of a holiday. Please provide us, your servants and your son David, with whatever you can spare." So David's servants went and spoke all these words to Nabal in David's name. Then they paused, but Nabal responded to David's servants, "Who is David, and who is this son of Jesse? This is a time when many servants are breaking away from their masters. Should I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give them to these men? I don't even know where they came from." So David's servants went on their way. When they had returned, they came and told David all these things. Then David instructed his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." So each one strapped on his sword, and David also strapped on his sword. About 400 men followed David, while 200 stayed behind with the equipment. But one of the servants told Nabal's wife Abigail, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our Lord, but he screamed at them. These men were very good to us. They did not insult us, nor did we sustain any loss during the entire time we were together in the field. Both night and day, they were a protective wall for us the entire time we were with them, while we were tending our flocks. Now be aware of this and see what you can do, for disaster has been planned for our Lord and his entire household. He is such a wicked person that no one tells him anything." So Abigail quickly took 200 loaves of bread, 2 containers of wine, 5 prepared sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 200 bunches of raisins, and 200 lumps of pressed figs. She loaded them on donkeys and said to her servants, "Go ahead of me, I will come after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Riding on her donkey, she went down under cover of the mountain. David and his men were coming down to meet her, and she encountered them. Now David had been thinking, "In vain I guarded everything that belonged to this man in the wilderness. I didn't take anything from him, but he has repaid my good with evil. God will severely punish David if I leave alive until morning, even one male from all those who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she got down quickly from the donkeys, threw herself face down before David, and bowed to the ground. Falling at his feet, she said, "My lord, I accept all the guilt, but please let your female servant speak to you. Please listen to the words of your servant. My lord should not pay attention to this wicked man Nabal. He simply lives up to his name. His name means fool. He is indeed foolish, but I, your servant, did not see the servants my lord sent. Now, my lord, as surely as the Lord lives, and as surely as you live, it is the Lord who has kept you from shedding blood and taking matters into your own hands. Now may your enemies and those who seek to harm my lord be like Nabal. Now let this present that your servant has brought to my lord be given to the servants who follow my lord. Please forgive the sin of your servant, for the Lord will certainly establish a lasting dynasty for my lord, because my lord fights the battles of the Lord. May no evil be found in all your days. When someone sets out to chase you and to take your life, the life of my Lord will be wrapped securely in the bag of the living by the Lord your God. But he will sling away the lives of your enemies from the sling pocket. The Lord will do for my Lord everything that he promised you, and he will make you a leader over Israel. Your conscience will not be overwhelmed with guilt for having poured out innocent blood and for having taken matters into your own hands. When the Lord has granted my Lord success, please remember your servant. Then David said to Abigail, Praise be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you this day to meet me. Praise be your good judgment. May you yourself be rewarded for having prevented me this day from shedding blood and taking matters into my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, he who has prevented me from harming you, if you had not come so quickly to meet me, by morning's light, not even one male belonging to Nabal would have remained alive. Then David took from her hand what she had brought to him. He said to her, Go back to your home in peace. Be assured that I have listened to you and responded favorably. When Abigail went back to Nabal, he was holding a banquet in his house, like that of the king. Nabal was having a good time and was very intoxicated. She told him absolutely nothing until morning's light. In the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him about these matters. He had a stroke and was paralyzed. After about 10 days, the Lord struck Nabal down and he died. When David heard that Nabal had died, he said, Praise be the Lord, who has vindicated me and avenged the insult that I suffered from Nabal. The Lord has kept his servant from doing evil, and he has repaid Nabal for his evil deeds. Then David sent word to Abigail and asked her to become his wife. So the servants of David went to Abigail at Carmel and said to her, David has sent us to you to bring you back to be his wife. She arose, bowed her face toward the ground, and said, Your female servant, like a lowly servant, will wash the feet of the servants of my lord. Then Abigail quickly went and mounted her donkey, with 5 of her female servants accompanying her. She followed David's messengers and became his wife. David also married Ahinoam of Jezreel. The 2 of them became his wives. Now Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. Okay. David had once helped and cared a lot for this very wealthy, evil man named David asks for help, but refuses. So David has evil intentions and plans to go and destroy Nabal and all the men who belong to him. But wife comes out to meet David with gifts and asks him not to. David decides not to go march against Nabal. Nabal gets a stroke and eventually dies. David takes Abigail as his wife, David also had another wife. David's first wife, Michal, Saul gave to be the wife of someone else. All right. Kind of a messy family, to say the least. 1 Samuel chapter 26. The Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Isn't David hiding on the hill of Hakilah near Jeshimon?" So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, accompanied by 3,000 select men of Israel, to look for David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped by the road on the hill of Hakilah near Jeshimon, but David was staying in the wilderness. When he realized that Saul had come to the wilderness to find him, David sent scouts and verified that Saul had indeed arrived. So David set out and went to the place where Saul camped. David saw the place where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the general in command of his army, were sleeping. Now Saul was lying in the entrenchment, and the army was camped all around him. David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp?" Abishai replied, "I will go down with you." So David and Abishai approached the army at night and found Saul lying asleep in the entrenchment with his spear struck in the ground by his head. Abner and the army were lying all around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me drive the spear right through him into the ground with one swift jab. A second jab won't be necessary." But David said to Abishai, "Don't kill him. Who can extend his hand against the Lord's chosen one and remain guiltless?" David went on to say, "As the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him down. Either his day will come and he will die, or he will go down into battle and be swept away. But may the Lord prevent me from extending my hand against the Lord's chosen one. Now take the spear by Saul's head and the jug of water, and let's get out of here." So David took the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got out of there. No one saw them or was aware of their presence or woke up. All of them were asleep, for the Lord had caused a deep sleep to fall on them. Then David crossed to the other side and stood on top of the hill some distance away. There was a considerable distance between them. David called to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, "Won't you answer, Abner?" Abner replied, "Who are you, that you have called to the king?" David said to Abner, "Aren't you a man? After all, who is like you in Israel? Why then haven't you protected your lord the king? One of the soldiers came to kill your lord the king. This failure on your part isn't good. As surely as the Lord lives, you people who have not protected your Lord, the Lord's chosen one, are as good as dead. Now look where the king's spear and jug of water that was by his head are." When Saul recognized David's voice, he said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" David replied, "Yes, it's my voice, my lord the king." He went on to say, "Why is my lord chasing his servant? What have I done? What wrong have I done? So let my lord the king now listen to the words of his servant. If the Lord has incited you against me, may he take delight in an offering. But if men have instigated this, may they be accursed before the Lord. For they have driven me away this day from being united with the Lord's inheritance, saying, 'Go on, serve other gods.' Now don't let my blood fall on the ground away from the Lord's presence. For the king of Israel has gone out to look for a flea, the way one looks for a partridge in the hill country." Saul replied, "I have sinned. Come back, my son David. I won't harm you anymore. For you treated my life with value this day. I have behaved foolishly and have made a very terrible mistake." David replied, "Here is the king's spear. Let one of your servants cross over and get it. The Lord rewards each man for his integrity and loyalty. Even though today the Lord delivered you into my hand, I was not willing to extend my hand against the Lord's chosen one. In the same way that I valued your life this day, may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all danger." Saul replied to David, "May you be rewarded, my son David. You will without question be successful." So David went on his way. Saul returned to his place. Okay. Saul chases David with his men. In the middle of the night, Saul is sleeping in the middle of the camp, and David and one of David's men approach all the way to Saul. David's man wants to kill Saul, but David refuses because he doesn't want anyone to touch the Lord's chosen one. Instead, he takes the spear and jug of water by Saul's head. In the daytime, Saul recognizes his fault and his sin. Okay. 1 Samuel chapter 27. David thought to himself, "One of these days I'm going to be swept away by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of searching for me through all the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand." So David left and crossed over to King Achish, son of Maoch of Gath, accompanied by his 600 men. David settled with Achish in Gath, along with his men and their families. David had with him his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite and Abigail the Carmelite, Nabal's widow. When Saul learned that David had fled to Gath, he did not mount a new search for him. David said to Achish, "If I have found favor with you, let me be given a place in one of the country towns, so that I can live there. Why should your servant settle in the royal city with you?" So Achish gave him Ziklag on that day. For that reason, Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah until this very day. The length of time that David lived in the Philistine countryside was 1 year and 4 months. Then David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. They had been living in that land for a long time, from the approach to Shur as far as the land of Egypt. When David would attack a district, he would leave neither man nor woman alive. He would take sheep, cattle, camels, and clothing, and would then go back to Achish. Achish would ask, "Where did you raid today?" David would say, "The Negev of Judah, or the Negev of Jerahmeel, or the Negev of the Kenites." Neither man nor woman would David leave alive so as to bring them back to Gath. He was thinking, "This way they can't tell on us, saying, 'This is what David did.'" Such was his practice the entire time that he lived in the country of the Philistines. So Achish trusted David, thinking to himself, "He is really hated among his own people in Israel. From now on, he will be my servant." Okay. David and his men, afraid of Saul, go to live in the land of the Philistines. David and his men regularly go and raid the different Canaanite nations nearby, and he brings back the spoils to the king in the land of the Philistines, but tells this king that he's been raiding towns in Israel. The king looks favorably on David because he assumes that David's own people now must hate him for all this raiding. Raid. Okay, last chapter for the day, 1 Samuel chapter 28. Oh, the Witch of Endor. Okay. In those days, the Philistines gathered their troops for war in order to fight Israel. Achish said to David, "You should fully understand that you and your men must go with me into the battle. David replied to Achish, that being the case, you will come to know what your servant can do. Achish said to David, then I will make you my bodyguard from now on. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had lamented over him, and had buried him in Ramah, his hometown. In the meantime, Saul had removed the mediums and magicians from the land. The Philistines assembled. They came and camped at Shunem. Saul mustered all Israel and camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw that the camp of the Philistines he was absolutely terrified. So Saul inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him, not by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by the prophets. So Saul instructed his servants, find me a woman who is a medium, so that I may go to her and inquire of her. His servants replied to him, there is a woman who is a medium in Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothing and left, accompanied by 2 of his men. They came to the woman at night and said, use your ritual pit to conjure up for me the one I tell you. But the woman said to him, look, you are aware of what Saul has done. He has removed the mediums and magicians from the land. Why are you trapping me so you can put me to death? But Saul swore an oath to her by the Lord, as surely as the Lord lives, you will not incur guilt on this matter. The woman replied, who is it that I should bring up for you? He said, bring up for me Samuel. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out loudly. The woman said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, don't be afraid, but what have you seen? The woman replied to Saul, I have seen a divine being coming up from the ground. He said to her, what about his appearance? She said, oh. No. No. I don't know if you can hear that, but my iPad, something that I said triggered my iPad's SIRI and has been listening ever since and is now bugging out and making this boop, 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 boop. Even if I turn down the volume, it still does it. I hope that's not too distracting. I'm just gonna keep on reading. He said to her, what about his appearance? She said, an old man is coming up. He is wrapped in a robe. Then Saul realized it was Samuel, and he bowed his face toward the ground and kneeled down. Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul said, I am terribly troubled. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has turned away from me. He does not answer me anymore, not by the prophets, nor by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what I should do. Samuel said, why are you asking me now that the Lord has turned away from you and has become your enemy? The Lord has done exactly as I prophesied. The Lord has torn the kingdom from your hand and has given it to your neighbor David. Since you did not obey the Lord and did not carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this thing to you today. The Lord will hand you and Israel over to the Philistines. Tomorrow both you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand the army of Israel over to the Philistines. Saul quickly fell full length on the ground and was very afraid because of Samuel's words. He was completely drained of energy, having not eaten anything that day and night. When the woman came to Saul and saw how terrified he was, she said to him, your servant has done what you asked. I took my life into my own hands and did what you told me. Now it's your turn to listen to your servant. Let me set before you a bit of bread so that you can eat. When you regain your strength, you can go on your way. But he refused to eat, saying, I won't eat. Both his servants and the woman urged him to eat, so he gave in. He got up from the ground and sat down on the bed. Now the woman had a well-fed calf at her home that she quickly slaughtered. Taking some flour, she kneaded it and baked bread without leaven. She brought it to Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they arose and left that same night. Okay, so that is the end of our reading for this morning. Why is it doing this? Oh, it stopped. Okay, it stopped. I don't know if you could hear that sound, but anyways, this is the end of our reading for this morning. A lot of crazy stuff happened in today's reading. Definitely following David a bit more closely and following Saul and his descent into madness and so much chaos. And yeah, like it was mentioned in the comment here, reading the evil thoughts that fill Saul with jealousy, rash, and murderous thoughts. It's been a lot. But let's pray and let's have a great day. Lord God, I thank you so much for this day. I thank you for this time that we've had to spend that we've gotten to spend like just reading your word and reading of what you were doing in history through David. And Lord, thank you for how you protected him and how we get to see all this taking place. And we get to recognize that you are God. Lord, I pray that you would bless us today, that we would have a wonderful day of serving you and representing you to everyone we encounter. I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow for a reading with a friend tomorrow. So take care. See ya.